Howdy everybody, Kamikaze Avalanche here, and I wanted to do another practical tutorial, this time on how I am filtering and sorting the nodes in my card-based constructed deck game. Now, my game is a deck construction game where you construct the game before the battle. But this applies to inventory management as well. Of course, if you have a complicated inventory of any type, whether it's cards or swords or food items or construction materials, you need to have a good way to sort and filter things out in case you have a large number of items, which of course in a deck constructor the player could end up with a massive pool of cards to choose from when constructing the deck. So this one, I only have 3 steps, but that's because a couple of the steps are broken down into additional sub-steps. So after we have a brief discussion about demonstration and discussion about what we're trying to accomplish, I'm going to be breaking it into first the filtering, and which involves multiple steps in and of itself. You can see I've broken that down into 3 steps. And then when we go into the sorting functionality, that is also broken down into 3 steps. All right, so let's get started with the demonstration of where we're at. So right here in this big lower left hand panel container is where I'm going to have all of the cards that the player actually owns. So you can see here we have some cards, and I have a couple of different card types. So some of the cards are melee attacks, some of them are ranged attacks. Right now I've got a couple of NPCs or allies or what have you that are a different card type as well. In the full game I have potions and talismans and light magic and dark magic attacks, but while I'm building this up I'm basically only messing with those 3, and I have some potions in there as well. So the first thing I want to look at is kind of the filtering. And what do I mean by filtering? I mean, I've got the card types up here, but maybe I want to narrow it down, and I'm not a wizard character, so I don't want to see the spells. I don't have any of those in my inventory, so instead we're going to demonstrate by filtering in and out, say, the melee attacks. So if I click this melee attack, it's not a button, but we'll see that when we go into the back end. But when I click on this texture rect, it's going to pull out all of those. And I'm just left with the ranged attacks and my NPCs. Similarly, I can pull out the NPCs, right? And then so I'm just left with, if I were to toggle these, I would be just left with the ranged attacks. Or I could just look at the melee attacks. So this is what I'm talking about when I'm saying filtering. Alright, so that should be pretty straightforward in what we're trying to accomplish, only showing one or a selected group of categories of cards. The next question is, what do I mean when I'm talking about sorting? So right here you can see that my cards have a couple of different properties. So the main ones that a character would want to look at is the attack value, right? And so the attack value is here in the upper left hand corner. The defensive value is the blue bubble in the upper right hand corner. The cards will have a rarity. So right now I've only got a bunch of commons and my NPCs are uncommons because I'm still in early development. And then we have the card type. So maybe I'd want to lump all the potions together, or we want to look at all of the ranged attacks first and then NPCs and have them all be clumped together. So let's look at that. All right, so here I've got one card and it has a 3 attack, and it's the only card I have right now that has a 3 attack. So maybe I want to pull those to the front. So if I sort by attack, it's going to sort the axe throws to the front, and then all of the 2s will be grouped together. But right now they're grouped together alphabetically. And then my 1s are grouped together, and then my 0s are grouped together at the end. Now, that's great. This lets me see the highest attack cards, but maybe I want to see the highest attack cards, and then I want to see the highest defense value cards next. And the only place we'll really see that here is with these 0-0s and the 0-2s. So if my secondary sort goes in and I want to look at the defensive value of the cards, we shouldn't see any changes up here, but these defend cards should pop in front of the arcane strikes. So if we do that, that's exactly what we see going on here. And then, all things being equal, if 2 cards have the same attack and the same defensive value, we're going to see them, the third sort is going to be alphabetically in the English version of it. Unfortunately, don't have anything set up for translated cards to be alphabetically by the translated effect, but that's what I have going for the third. But you could follow this on to carry on and have third order sorting and fourth order sorting, whatever you need to have. All right, so that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about sorting. So we've looked at the sorting and the filtering, and let me throw these back into the deck. And I just want to point out that I've got these doing the sorting as well. I don't filter the cards in the deck, but the sorting effect still happens over there. I actually have a limit to how many of the same types of certain cards can be in the deck, and right now I can only have 1 of every type of NPC, so it locks it out. Despite the deck that I have built in the Godot console actually having those in there. So if I were to save it, I would actually be locked out of having this card in the deck permanently. All right, so let me just do a quick demonstration that the sorting still works. So here we'll sort by card type, and then we'll see the NPC goes to the front, and then we get the ranged attacks, and then we get the melee attacks, and then I could have the attack as well. And we'll see that the axe throws go to the top of the ranged attacks and the smashes go to the front of the melee attacks. All right, so that's a pretty broad overview of what I'm trying to accomplish here. And now let's go ahead and jump to the back end and take a look at what's going on in the back end. So here is my deck constructor scene that we have going on here, and this is what we're looking. I have my 3 panels, and then you might have seen that I had that tooltip card. I guess if I jump to it, right, when I hover over those in here as well, when I'm over a card, I get to see the full version of the card so that the player can get all of the effect text details as well if they want to. But these scripts are going to take place in a lot of places. Now, the header up here is, of course, where I'm going to have the option button and these texture recs that will be performing the sorting and the filtering. So let's take a look at the filtering first and see what we've got going on here. So I could have gone with a button for these, but I specifically chose not to because buttons have a lot of extra functionality that I don't really need going on. And it really is a lot of extra overhead and makes things more complicated because if it's a texture button, I want to put all of the other pieces in it as well. But the other thing that you'll notice when I come back to this is when I click it, right, it grays out and it stays grayed out until I click it again and it comes back in. So I opted not to go with a button and instead am just doing a texture rec. And then I have the icon there underneath just so we can differentiate between the two types of physical attacks, the two types of magic attacks, and the potions versus the talismans that the player can have in their deck. So in here, I've got the melee toggle, right? Sizing considerations. I set aside size to it. But here, I'm actually going with a GUI input. And the GUI input signal I have tying up. Do I have it tied up here? Up here to my root node script. So up here you see each of these toggles, and I'm calling them toggle even though they're just texture rec because that's the function they're performing. They come up here to the script on my root scene of this portion of the tree. So in here I have a bunch of variables, and by default I'm setting them to be true. All right. So the GUI input, when someone has any type of GUI input over that asset, even though I'm moving, it's actually sending some GUI input to this script. However, when we go down to it, what you're going to see is I'm not going to pay any attention to any of these unless the action pressed is kind of that mouse clicked. So is action pressed select card, and that's defined in my project settings, input map. You can see my select card, SELECT. My select card is right now just the left mouse button. So if someone has their mouse over that texture rec and they click it, then we're going to go into this if-then statement, right? If this variable is set to true, we're going to turn it to false. If it's false, we're going to turn it to true, right? If we're setting it to false, I also want to change the modulate, and I'm changing the modulate .a to 0.3, and that's what's giving us that graying effect of it. And since it's a modulate, it also modulates the icon that's underneath there to make it more transparent and less visible, right? And when I'm setting it to true, turning it off, then we set the modulate back to 100%. After we do that, it's actually probably better if I just put these both, because I actually shouldn't be emitting these as I am moving the mouse in there. I actually only want to emit the signal to, hey, let's toggle the visibility in there. I'll fix the rest of these afterwards, but going over this code has had a bonus effect and helped me realize that I'm being a little bit wasteful in emitting the signals, right? So the script for when they click on those toggles, pretty straightforward. We're changing the variable to say whether they're visible or not. We're changing their modulate function, and then we are going to the event bus and we are emitting a signal and we're saying, hey, we are changing ranged weapons, and then if it's true, this second variable will go across as true. In this case, it'll actually come across as false, and in this case, it'll come across as true. So let's see where we see these else in the script. And then you're going to see, of course, we're going to see it in the event bus, right? And it's coming here, toggle card pool visibility. And my event bus, of course, is a global auto load, right? And that's just how an event bus is set up. So when they click on one of those buttons, it's changing the visibility, changing the variable, emitting a signal to the event bus that says the type of card that's being toggled on or off and whether it's being toggled on or off. And then here we're going to see in the cards, I'm going to, in the ready function, connect to that event. Okay, so in the ready function, I go events.toggle card pool visibility, and I connect it to this function down here. You'll remember in the emit function, we had the card type, which in the example we looked at was ranged, and then whether it's visible or not. Just a simple one-line script here. So this triggers it on all of the cards at the same time. If the card type that we sent with the emit signal is the same as the card's card type, we either make it visible or make it invisible depending on the second variable that was sent along when we emitted the function. All right, so a couple of steps there, right? We created the faux button-like signal and event. We put it in the root node script. We created an event bus signal. We tied it to each of the cards, and then so when any of those is clicked, we're going to trigger it to look at all the cards and either turn them visible or not. So that's the filtering function. All right, let's now go back and let's take a look at the pieces that are there for the sorting functionality. Now, the sorting functionality, I actually decided I am going to put the script in the grid container that contains all of the cards. Now, I could have put it up here as well, but I didn't want that script to get too bloated. However, the functionality, I just decided I'm going to put in the container that holds all of the cards. So first of all, let's take a look at the option buttons. So if we come over here, and I've got my two sort option buttons, the first thing we're going to look at is I have the items. In the items I have the text, they have an ID number, and that's really all I need for the functionality I need for these. I don't really want an icon or any of the other pieces right there. And then the second piece to these option buttons is in the signals when an item is selected. So when they open the option button and they go to a new item in there, I'm going to connect it to, and I'm going to trigger a function over here in this GridContainer script. So down here, you're going to see if they change the first option button, I set up two variables at the top of this script as well, sort1 and sort2, and they're integers. And then so what we're going to see is if they select main sort, we're going to turn sort 1 to be 0. If they select attack, it's going to be 1. If it's absorb, 2. The rarity 3. Card type 4. And then I'm going to trigger the sort cards function. For the second option button, it comes to here as well. And I'm just setting that second variable to be the index of that second sort option. And then again, triggering the sort cards functionality. When we go into the sort card functionality, I again created an event. And the reason why I created this event is in order to also have the card sort when we're looking at the deck. So I basically have a copy of the sort functionality. I don't have a copy of this in there because the signal from the option buttons only needs to connect to one place. However, I have the rest of the sort functionality also existing in the deck VBox container. Anyway, so let's go back to that. So I'm emitting that signal to basically turn on the sorting in my deck list as well. And then the very next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get all of the nodes that exist within this grid container, because I'm going to have a bunch of cards in there and I want to build an array of all of them for the sorting. All right, so the next step, I create a temporary array of all of the cards that exist in my grid container. And then I'm going to sort them based on the criteria, right? So sorted nodes.sort custom, and sort custom will call this first sort. Now, quick discussion of what this sort custom is going to do. It's going to take a look at all of the pairs of items in the array, and it's going to run all of them through this first sort function. And then if it's true, it will change the order of them depending on if the result of this first sort is true or false. So I'm creating a function that returns true or false, or Boolean. All right. So, and it's just going to do these for all pairs of items until it gets the sort result that we want. Digging into the sort function, I actually broke my sort function into 3 separate functions because whether or not I have 2 different sort things selected, it needs to behave differently or not. So when it comes in here, we're going to perform a match based on what this sort 1 variable is. You'll remember when we look over here that index 1 is attack, right? So in the case that that variable is set to 1, we want to look at the attack value of the first card versus the attack value of the second card. If the first card has higher than attack value, we select true, and that first card stays in front. Then, if the case is that the 2 cards have the same attack value, that's when we want to look at the second sort criteria, right? So those are the 2 cases. Now, of course, if the B card has higher attack than the A card, it's going to come through, it's going to skip here, it's going to skip here, and then we're going to return false, and then the 2 cards are going to switch order. And B card is going to be placed in front because it has higher attack. All right, so case 1, we're looking at the attack. If it's 2, we're looking at the defense value of the cards, 3, the rarities, and 4, the card types. And if it's 0, we actually just want to look at the card alphabetical names. So with no sort, we're sorting alphabetically, and higher alphabetical order returns true. All right, so let's dig down the next step into my sort. So if the two cards are the exact same on the primary sort criteria, then we take those two items and we're sending them to a secondary sort. And this looks mostly the same, except instead of when the cards are identical, we're looking at a third sort. Then I'm going to a function that's just doing the alphabetical sort, right? So remember, the only time we're getting to this secondary sort is if the first sort criteria, the two cards are the same. They're the same card type, or they're the same attack value, or they're the same defense value, what have you. All right, so the second sort, we're then ordering from there. If the card is the same attack, the same attack value, and then our second sort is defense, and it's the same defense value, we're not going to do anything, and it's a higher defense value, we're not going to do anything. If they are the same of the primary sort and the same of the secondary sort, then we're just going to sort them alphabetically. All right. Hopefully you could follow that, but let me just kind of see if I can summarize that really quickly. When we go through the sort, we're performing a match to determine which criteria we're looking at. If there is a difference, it sorts it in the proper way, whether true or false. If it's the same, then it looks at the second criteria. For the secondary criteria, it's the same process. If there's a difference, it sorts it in the right order, whether it's the true or the flipping because of the false. Or then it moves down to look at the alphabetized version of it. So we did that. We did our custom sort, which is kind of an advanced function. And now we have our temporary array in the correct order that we want to look at it. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to set their order in the grid container or the vertical box container based on the order they are in our temporary array. So how do we do that? Well, for this, I create another new temporary variable. And you can call it whatever you want. It just has to be an integer, and it's starting with 0. So this line of code isn't actually needed. I can put this out. Now I'm going to iterate through each of the nodes here in my temporary array. And remember, it's going to go in the order that we just sorted it into. And we're going to move it. It's going to be this node, right? And we're going to give it an index of 0. Then this for loop is going to increment our integer, and then it's going to move to the next one, and it's going to put it at index 1, and then index 2, and index 3. So that's how I'm able to sort the nodes in here. I run them through a custom sort function. After they've been sorted, I iterate through in a for loop, and I move them to an incrementing index number. And this is one of my longer videos, but I think there's a lot going on here. And that's how we got to the place where we can see my filtering and sorting functionality. Okay. I would also like to point out that even if I'm filtered out, the card is still getting sorted in the order based on, in this case, the absorb and the card type. However, it's hidden so it doesn't take up a slot in the grid container at all. Whew, that was quite a detailed one. Hopefully you got to peek under the hood of how I was creating a faux button that I'm toggling on and off, how I'm filtering these inventory items by toggling their visibility in a grid container, how I'm sorting them using a custom sort functionality and moving the nodes around within the container as well. Quite a lot of moving pieces to make this work, but hopefully you guys were able to pick up something and hopefully have a new trick added to your bag of tricks. All right, take care everyone and have a good one. Kamikaze Avalanche out.